Hello, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to my YouTube channel. And as always, here is Candy. Not exactly a puppy, but I still call her the Wonder Pup. 3.5 years old now, so not a puppy, but still lots of puppy energy. And her mandatory treat, which buys me peace for the duration of the podcast video. And there she is again. So sit. Get it in the right order. Sit. No, that's lay down. Give me your paw. Lay down. Speak. There's the. And now Candy is placated. Hopefully, for the duration of this video, she'll give me peace. Although she might jump up on me, she did last time. Where are we? It is now the 20th of July, 2023, 11:15 p.m. And as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for the likes, the subscriptions, the shares, anything of that nature. As I mentioned on Sunday, I'm just a voice in the wilderness, if you will, trying to inject myself somewhat into the public discourse. I know that I'm no Joe Rogan, no Ben Shapiro. I'm not the Young Turks or anything like that. But at the same time, often I find when the media gives voice to my points of view, they typically do it in a very negative fashion. Often the individuals expressing views with which I agree are not often the most well-spoken. Often they're like, for those who remember the old All in the Family TV show, they're Archie Bunker type characters. And I see that as being done on purpose to delegitimize what are very legitimate points of view. Identity politics. As an older, I'm in my mid-50s, as an older white man, straight Christian, I'm canceled on just about every front. So I wanted to talk a bit tonight about war, disease, and famine as being the three main drivers of population control. That's my opinion, based on what I know of history, human history, going back thousands of years. The three main drivers, I think, careful study, I think, would bear that out, that those are three main drivers, if not the three most significant factors in controlling the human population. I would imagine all three are in the top 10. And I suspect they're probably 1, 2, and 3. I don't know which order. And on April 30th of this year, April 30th, 2023, I put out a video, one that got watched more than the usual number of my videos. Typically get a few dozen views, maybe 15, 20, might go 40, 50, but on occasion I'll get 100, maybe even 200. And a couple have gone even north of that, but that's not often. And that video where I made 3 predictions on April 30th, that one drove some interest for whatever reason. And the 3 predictions I made were that in the summer of 2023, which we are now in, when I made the video, it wasn't yet summer. Summer starts June 21st, so we had to get through all of May and the better part of June. I was predicting that there would be the declaration of a global climate emergency, might be branded as the war on climate change. And since I put that video out, a number of things have happened that have made me think, I think I got it right. It still hasn't happened yet, but the summer still has the remainder of, we still have 11 days left in July. We have all of August, and we have 3 weeks in September. So summer has a long way to go. And since that time, we've had the wildfire situation and the poor air quality in certain Canadian cities and large parts of the American Northeast predominantly, but also the American Midwest even have been reportedly affected by poor air quality, which is said to be resulting from wildfire smoke traveling south from Canada down to the United States. Cities like Chicago, Detroit for sure, and again, large part New York City got hit, and large parts of, I think they're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 70, 80 million Americans have been affected. And then more recently, there have been stories of heat domes that are basically super hot regions. They're reporting, there's a lot of reporting going on about new record high temperatures, depending on when they started keeping records. And sometimes it goes back to the 1950s. Sometimes it goes back into the 1800s. But a lot of it is based on computer modeling. No one was keeping temperature records in the 1600s, 1500s, 1400s. And so when you look at records, when they say that, Toronto, Ontario experienced its hottest day on record, with record keeping going back to, let's say, 1880 or whatever the year happens to be. Well, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I mean, this planet, we go through periods of what we go through: warming trends, cooling trends, warming trends, cooling trends. It's cyclical in nature, and we've only been keeping track at the earliest since the 1800s. And I've mentioned before, the medieval warming period is said to have started sometime around the year 950 AD, ran until about 1400 AD. Then from 1400 AD until the late 1700s, perhaps the early 1800s, we had a cooling trend called the Little Ice Age. And that was followed by the trend that we're currently in, a warming trend. It hasn't received a name like the medieval warming period, Little Ice Age. Now I guess they're calling it the man-made warming trend. But this cyclical nature is historic. It happens. And the thing is, these cycles, these periods of warming and cooling last 3, 4, perhaps as long as 500 years. And so when our record keeping only goes back 50 or even 100 years, it doesn't even capture an entire trend, an entire period. So anyway, that's looking like a good prediction, I think. The second prediction was for this fall, and saying that there would be the emergence of a new health emergency, that it might be a new strain variant of COVID, or perhaps Marburg or some other viral pathogen. And now it's being reported that there is the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. And apparently that has popped up in Europe. Typically, it is said to be endemic in certain more hotter climates, like I guess Africa. They consider this hemorrhagic fever, this Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, to be endemic in places. And they are telling us that it is spread by ticks, and that the reason it's now spreading to parts of Europe is that because of climate change. Climate change is driving disease. So we have this confluence of climate change and health. And that's why I see the declaration of a climate emergency to be on the radar. I put it sometime this summer. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be next year. Who knows? And then further along with that prediction, I anticipate very strongly that the updated COVID shots, not only will they be pushed, I expect a very strong possibility that they would again be mandated. CBC News, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Crown Corporation, meaning that it's owned by the Canadian government, government-funded media, which apparently they don't like being referred to as government-funded, even though that's public knowledge. They get over $1 billion a year from taxpayers. And anyway, they had Prince Edward Island's Chief Medical Officer of Health was being interviewed on CBC. And I saw her, listened to her. I saw the segment. I didn't watch it live on TV. I get my news digitally. So this was a CBC News article, which had embedded in it a video of that segment on their news broadcast. And she was being interviewed about this new shot, which NACI, N-A-C-I, which stands for the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, is now urging Canadians to get come the fall when it's made available. There's going to be a new shot. If you're not living under a rock, you're aware of this. There's a new shot that will be available. And I heard this Chief Medical Officer of Health spreading what I consider to be total misinformation, because she said during that interview that they know that the vaccine that they're going to be, the mRNA jab that they're going to be giving out in the fall, that it will match up with the whatever strain or variant of COVID is circulating at that time. And does the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province of PEI, does she have a time machine? How does she know that the vaccine that's being offered at that time will match up with the whatever strain is circulating? She correctly equated it to the annual flu shot and said, every year, just ahead of flu season, what happens is that health officials, public health officials, private companies, they make a best guess. They try to guess which strain or which strains of the flu will be the most dominant in the upcoming flu season. And we will be told that sometimes they got it right, and sometimes we'll be told they got it wrong. When there is a particularly bad flu season with lots of people who got the flu shot still getting sick with flu, public health officials will announce that, well, the variant or the strain of flu, influenza, that is circulating is not included in this year's dose. We guessed wrong. Well, how can they know that they're guessing right when all these mRNA shots are narrowly focused on the spike protein, and the spike protein, according to all the literature out there, is, if not the most volatile, most subject to mutation component of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. If it's not the most mutatable, it is certainly one of the most mutatable. It's very unstable. And I've heard there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Michael Yeadon, Y-E-A-D-O-N. He's a former vice president at Pfizer, one of that company's chief science officers previously. About 15 years ago, he left Pfizer, started his own biotech company. And that biotech company that he started was later sold to Novartis, and Novartis paid, according to Forbes magazine, $1 billion US. That was their estimate as to the price tag. And Dr. Michael Yeadon has issued statements and has spoken in interviews and put out videos, all saying that it's, to his mind-blowing, that when deciding what component of the SARS-CoV-2 virus to target, that they targeted what is an incredibly unstable component, one that is subject to mutations like crazy, that you would ideally in his expert opinion, want to target a component of the virus that is very stable and very not subject to mutations. But I'm getting out of my lane. I'm just sharing the opinions of an expert. I don't know whether he's right or wrong. We do know that the experts, when they told us at the beginning that the SARS-CoV-2 vaccines, that the COVID jabs, that they would provide long-lasting sterilizing immunity, we know that was misinformation. There are the excuse that is given, we hear, of course, is that the science changed. No, I say, no, the science didn't change. You were wrong. You made a prediction, and your prediction was wrong. So own it. And whenever anyone makes a prediction about the future, that's what it is. It is a prediction, unless, what are they claiming, divine revelation? So everyone knows, we all know people who, if you haven't had the jab yourself, you know people who've had it, who've had COVID often multiple times. People still getting sick from the disease once, twice, three times and more, despite having supposedly been protected against infection. That's what we had been told at the beginning. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The third prediction was an escalation of the war between Ukraine and Russia, or the emergence of another conflict. Maybe China, Taiwan, maybe the Middle East, who knows? There's always the potential for significant outbreaks of war. And now, in terms of that prediction, what's recently happened is there has been something of an escalation in the war between Russia and Ukraine, although it's not like it's expanded. It's not like Russia has, it's not like the Chinese are joining in and sending forces, or Ukraine is being joined by NATO troops. But what's happened, and it relates to famine, is the fact that Russia has apparently, at least according to the reporting, which you have to, in today's world, you have to take with a grain of salt. There's an old saying that the first casualty of war is truth. But it's being reported that Russia is now targeting Ukrainian seaports which are essential to Ukraine's economy, and in particular to their agricultural industry. I haven't linked it below because it's been so widely reported. I'm sure most will have seen it, but you could look this up yourself. The CNBC News, an article that I'm reading that was published on Thursday, July 20th, so today, this evening, or late afternoon, 4:49 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Ukraine war live updates. Russia continues to attack Ukraine ports. Wheat prices soar as concern for global food supplies rise. And I'll just read a bit. Ukraine on Thursday said it may classify all ships traversing the Black Sea toward Russian ports as potential carriers of military cargo, as potential carriers of military cargo from midnight Friday, a day after Russia did the same for Ukraine-bound vessels. Concerns are mounting over the threat to global food supplies from closed trade routes after Russia suspended something called the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which has allowed the delivery of Ukrainian grains to global markets. In having conversations with people, I was surprised to see the number of people who were not aware that Ukraine is a major supplier to world grain markets. Ukraine grows a lot of wheat. Anyway, the article goes on. Since then, Russia has launched dozens of strikes on the Ukrainian port cities of Odessa and Mykolaiv. I can't pronounce it. Mykolaiv. I'm going to say Mykolaiv. Moscow has said these attacks are retaliation for Ukraine's terrorist attack against the Crimean Bridge, and it puts the words terrorist attack in quotes. So what we have is the potential for an impact on the world's food supply. And that when we look at human population and the three main drivers, three aspects that control it are, again, my opinion, but I think it would be borne out by careful research: war, disease, and famine, in no particular order. And the war that's happening between Russia and Ukraine could lead to damage to the global supply chain in relation to food, and grain is obviously a key component. Think pasta, obviously, think bread. Think about so many foods that we consume, how much grain, wheat is involved. And so I'm actually wondering whether, maybe I got things backwards. Maybe this escalation in the war comes before the declaration of a global climate emergency. Who knows? Who knows? These are just one man's thoughts, views, and opinions. And what do you do? What do you do in today's world where so many things are going on? For me, as a Christian, I lean on my faith. God's got this at the end of the day. I know that we live in a post-Christian, we live in a post-truth world. The truth is subjective now. The objective reality no longer holds any currency in the marketplace of ideas. We live in a world where men can be women and women can be men, and their genetic chromosomal makeup is ignored. And unfortunately, it's being rammed down our throats. I genuinely believe that a significant majority, I don't know if I would say the vast majority, that might be overstating it, but I do believe it's over 50% of the population does not go along with this idea that an individual with an X and a Y chromosome, with an Adam's apple, testicles, penis, and all the other male physical attributes, that person can declare that, well, I'm a woman now, and that society has to accept it. I genuinely believe that well over 50% of the population thinks that's nonsense. And evidence of that, I think, is pointed out by Dylan McIlvaney being made something of a spokesperson for Bud Light, his image appearing on their beer cans, and sales of Bud Light fall off a cliff. Some Costco's are reportedly no longer carrying Bud Light because no one's buying Bud Light. So they can create the impression that everyone's going along with this, but that doesn't make it reality. Target likewise came out with a clothing line, a transgender clothing line, and people stayed away from that store in droves, and their market capitalization got hammered to the tune of, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $17 billion because their share price just went into the basement. This is what happens. But if you turn on the news, if you go online, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, you get this digital illusion that everyone's on side with it. But digital media, the digital space is not reality. It's not flesh and bone. This is not Gordon Causey talking. This is a digital representation of me. The way people talk online is different from the way they talk in person. And it's in person that we need to be having these conversations. Because if you go online, if you go and you watch the media, anyone expressing the views that I hold with respect to gender, they're going to only show you a person who comes across as an Archie Bunker type, and that's the image they want to portray because they want to play identity politics, and they want people to think, well, I'm not identifying, I'm not going to put myself in that person's camp. I personally, the way I view it, I'm not in anybody's camp. I am, but there are ideas that I share with people in a variety of different camps. I don't care about camps. I don't care about this identity politic game that this is being used to divide the population: right, left, straight, gay, transgendered, or transgender affirming, transgender affirming. They want everyone hating on each other. I'm a Christian. Well, I've got no truck with, they want me. I have friends who are Islamic and Sikh or Sikh. Sikhs actually pronounce their faith as the Sikh faith. That's their pronunciation because it's a homonym for Sikh. So they don't have an issue. I don't believe anyone I know who's a Sikh, they don't have an issue if you don't say Sikh, if you say Sikh. But I'm not digressing again, something I often do. It always helps me to have engagement because it helps me focus. But I see I only have one person watching right now, and I don't want to go on too much longer. I like to keep these under 30 minutes. So I'll end it there. We'll see what happens in the coming days, weeks, months. See if my predictions come true. Are we going to have a global climate emergency declared before the summer ends? We'll see. I still think if I was a betting man, I would still put money on it. Will we see a further escalation in this Ukraine-Russia conflict? Will we see the emergence of another war? Maybe China, Taiwan, or Middle East or somewhere. Time will tell. Will the new COVID shots that they're spreading misinformation about again, even on CBC, that bugged me. That bothered me that this chief medical officer of health for PI was able to say, the new vaccine will match with the variant that's going to be circulating in the fall. So we have the chief medical officer of health who's claiming to be Nostradamus, and that she knows the future and she knows what strain will be the dominant strain in the fall. And she knows that they've guessed right. I do think the shot is going to be forced. I do think the mandates are coming back. I do think the vaccine passport is coming back October, November, before the end of the year. But goodness knows, lots of people are waking up to the fact that we are in the middle of this great reset, and that the great reset is just simply a marketing branding statement. It's a euphemism. What they're doing is they're tearing down our old world system, and they want to bring in a new world order, going back to George H.W. Bush, President of the United States from 1988 to 1992, for those 4 years. He said it all the way back then, 40 odd years ago, that they've been planning this new world order for a very long time. And I would go so far as to say since the closing days of World War II. And World War II was the attempt to bring in a new world order then. I should do a video on that, about the fact that Hitler was a puppet and that he was controlled by corporate industrialist interests back in the 1930s, including the Rockefeller Foundation out of the United States, including Henry Ford was a big fan of Adolf Hitler. And you can look at Klaus Schwab and look at his father's connections. His father's Swiss German, and look at the connections there. And that was an attempt to bring in a fascist global new world order that failed. And this one will fail as well. But remember the cost that was involved in defeating that agenda back in the very late 1930s on into the 40s, the massive cost. And we're facing, there are more tools available to those who are pushing this agenda. And fascism ultimately is corporate. It's a corporate agenda. And fascists use government as their puppet. And we look at this World Economic Forum, which is a confluence of government, corporate individuals, corporate money, corporate influence, and academia. But the hub of the wheel, the center of it, is the corporate money, because they pay for everything. It's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. And the corporate sector has bought off our governments. It's buying off and has bought off our educational institutions. And now they're pushing an agenda down our throats. And there need to be voices speaking out against it. Mine, again, a voice in the wilderness, or as I often say, a fart in a hurricane. And I know that's what I am. But if enough little pipsqueak voices start speaking, we amplify. So I'll end it there. I've gone over my 30-minute window. I like to keep them under 30. This one will go 31, 32. God bless. We'll talk to you in a few more nights. And again, as always, thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Can't believe it. This miserable, pathetic channel has, I think it's 116 now. I've added something like 9 in the last week or so. Unbelievable. Anyway, talk to you again. And again, God bless.